From the creators of Off the Record, one of the most exclusive, invite-only events for revenue leaders, GetAccept is now bringing these conversations and insights on the record. This is the podcast where revenue leaders share their biggest challenges and how they overcame them. And here's your host, Morgan Ingram.
Welcome back to another episode of On the Record with GetAccept. I'm your host, Morgan J. Ingram, and today we had Rich. Incredible story from going at the top of your game and then starting all over again and climbing back up. So this is a very fascinating story and how he went from an award-winning sales team to becoming the individual contributor that he had to bring it back in a new vertical. And so this was a very inspiring story. I hope that y'all listened to this all the way through. And it was unexpected on how this all went down, but there are three main things that you want to focus on. Dealing with the unexpected and how you can deal with that with career transition. So ultimately, everything's going to change in your life at some point. And how do you manage that? How do you emotionally get through that? He talks about that. He also talks about how to getting back to the sales basics. You get back to where you were before. I think people always want to figure out, like, how do I do the advanced trick or the 360 when it's like, how do we do the layup to be successful? And then also how to adapt when the environment is changing. And he talks a lot about how he does that with a new vertical, a new, completely new territory, and how he works with other people to get back to the top. So this story inspired me a lot. You can tell by my energy. I just really love this conversation. We could have talked for hours. Hopefully y'all enjoy this and get some takeaways. We're going to keep it real. We're going to share some insights. As always, enjoy. Rich, what's going on, man? So this is, before we actually start into the actual podcast, the last time that we talked was in 2019 when we met in person for the training in San Francisco. I think that's the last time that we've talked, like, in person.
Yeah, it is. And actually, when we were getting on this podcast, I was thinking back, and I'm like, but what we're going to talk about today is right around that time period. So this will be actually pretty pertinent to the conversation, which is cool.
Yeah. So before we dive into the three segments we typically do, the first thing I want to talk about is a fun fact we always do. We always do some research. And I noticed that you did D2 football.
I did.
So the question becomes, well, first of all, how excited are you that NCAA 2025 is out after being gone? That's the first question. The follow-up question is, what did you play in college, and then what did you learn from that experience? Did it transfer over to sales leadership, or like not at all?
Yeah. All right. So college football 25. I'm not a huge gamer, but I think it's awesome and it's cool with the NIL stuff. I definitely think that's really cool for the game and the players. And then so I played defensive line at a small school up in New Hampshire. We played in the Northeast 10 conference. It was fun. I mean, made a lot of good friends. It taught me a lot of things. The team I was on, we were not very good. So we lost a lot of games. So it definitely taught me a lot of things, primarily dealing with adversity. Because, fun fact, my team actually, over my 4 years, we lost, I think, 29 games or something crazy like that. So we were terrible.
What did you win?
We won 4 games my freshman year and 1 game my sophomore year. So I think it might have even been more than 29. I think that was in 3 years we lost 29 games. So anyways, it taught me to, like, deal with sucky situations and kind of keep showing up and being your best. And so, that's good for sales, obviously. So
that is sales.
I mean, I was used to getting my ass kicked on the field, and then I went to sales in 2008 and got my ass kicked, and I was like, all right, I'm used to getting my ass kicked, so I can do this.
I can make it. At least you weren't getting, like, physically injured in sales.
I know. Yeah, it's actually easier in a lot of ways on the football field, but it can be harder too, because you're not, no one's ear holing you when you're making sales calls. They're just yelling at you.
Are you just expecting to get hit? Is that why? Like, what makes it easier?
I don't know, man. It's football, right? I know you're more of a hoops guy, but, like, you're in that mindset of contact and physicality, and it's just like you're expecting it. And I play D-line, so a lot of the contact, like I'm initiating the contact too. And so, yeah, when you get beat playing D-line, like, yeah, if a big lineman, pancake blocks you, okay, like you just get up and try again the next play, So, but
That makes sense.
yeah.
So let's go into that. You went to a lot of adversity. We're not here to talk about football adversity. I mean, we can mix that in, but we're here to talk about the sales leadership adversity. So you've been a VP in multiple places, and now you're still that. And I just want to understand, like, what was the biggest challenge that you faced, and then we'll unpack it from there.
Yeah. So you mentioned when we last met in 2019, this is actually like right before what I'm going to talk about. So that team I was leading at the time was our West Coast field sales org. So we had a team on site in San Francisco. We had 8 reps. I mean, you met a lot of these reps back when we last saw each other. Yeah, Tom. I mean, we had an amazing team, award-winning team. Like we had sales reps of the year on my team. I won sales leader of the year with that team. I mean, we did almost $100 million on that team in 4 years, and we were like, in the company, we were very, very revered in the company. Like we were crushing it. And the biggest adversity that I want to talk about is essentially that next year. So 2020. And everyone knows what happened in 2020. And in San Francisco specifically, SF closed, right? So we were used to being in the office, whole sales team there together. We had an amazing culture. We're ringing the bell. People are fired up, and we're helping each other, collaborating. Awesome. 2020 hits. We were remote, and we didn't know how long it was going to last for. So that was challenging in and of itself, obviously. But when it became more challenging is when, like, headquarters decided we weren't going to reopen the office. So we were like, all right, we're going to sublease the San Francisco office. Your field organization is now being rolled into HQ. So, I ran sales for the San Francisco field office. So I essentially became, essentially overnight obsolete, right? My role was no longer existed. So what happened, a lot of the reps that we had at the time, they either, all of them moved out of San Francisco because a lot of they were younger, they were renting apartments, they couldn't go out to get food, they couldn't go to whatever, they couldn't do anything really. Yeah, so everyone left, literally. They moved, either back to where they came from or somewhere that was more open, and that team rolled up under HQ. So essentially, that 2020 year, I managed that team remotely. But then heading into 2021, my CRO, he tapped me. He's like, hey, like, we're not going to have what you're doing anymore, at least for the foreseeable future. So in previous to that, I'd kind of heard some rumblings about a new business unit we were going to launch. And it was framed to like the leadership team, like, hey, do you know of any reps who you think would be like resilient enough to essentially call into customers who have canceled and try to get them to come back to spending with TechTarget? And my CRO, he called it win back. And so during that period prior to 2020, we were like, all right, yeah, this rep might do it. It's going to be a really hard job. Like no one really wants to do this job. And so that was kind of the talk track, and everyone's like, I don't want to do that, right? And so, of course, my CRO is like, hey, like we're going to have you head up this new win back initiative. And I didn't expect it, and I was like taken aback, and I was like, all right, well, what's the structure going to be, right? So previously, I was leading the team. We had 8 reps, and we were doing 20 to 25 million bucks a year. Pretty big team. We were in the Bay Area, obviously calling into the biggest, best accounts. So you name it, we were managing those accounts. So this new win back team, he's like, hey, you're going to lead this team. Now, the different dynamic, it wasn't a traditional like sales team with like lots of people. He's like, yeah, it's going to be you leading the team. And then you're going to have one senior sales rep. And this is a rep who had been at TechTarget for over 20 years at the time. He's someone I had worked with like kind of a little bit over the years, but never directly. We're never on the same team. He had run business units previously, like he was a VP, running sales teams, and then he kind of got put back into like a field rep role a couple of years prior, and he had a bit of a reputation, right? Kind of old school, hard to work with, but he's an animal, like that was kind of the reputation. So they're like, all right, it's going to be you and Brian. And then you're going to have one AE, and the AE in the sense of more of like a sales administrative type person to help us. So it's just 3 of us. And I'm like, okay, this is a team I'm leading. There's 3 people. And he's like, another thing too, like because of, kind of the situation and how you're calling into angry past customers, he's like, I want you to run the sales motion with Brian, like directly, meaning essentially going from managing a team exclusively to now, like I'm essentially carrying a bag again, right? And so that was kind of how it was framed to me. We had a number of accounts that had canceled, and accounts ranged from bigger logos to smaller ones you never heard of. And so my first kind of reaction to that was like, wow, this is like a huge kind of demotion. It's like, it was a huge ego check. Yeah, it was a huge ego check. I'm like, wow, like, and a lot of these things that happen were outside of my control. So it's not anything that we did as a team or that I did as a leader that caused me to be put in this role. It just kind of was the situation we were dealing with. And so given everything that's going on in the world, like the uncertainty, whatever, I'm like, all right, I'll do this. Obviously I got over my ego and I was like, hey, mental shift. I'm just going to tackle this thing and do it the best way that I possibly can. And so that was kind of the initial challenge, right? Which was hard initially. When I got the news, I was like, wow, this is wild. So, that was the initial challenge.
That's so wild. Okay, so I mean, for all leaders listening in, like there are moments where you're riding high, and then all of a sudden now you become a individual contributor again. And the challenge in that, what I guess you stayed in that. So what made you stay, and then how did you not completely resent that and go in a completely negative state?
Yeah, man. So my mindset during this was like, I kind of took pride in my willingness to do it
Yeah.
because I don't know. I knew that other people in a similar situation to me would have been like, no, I'm not
You're
going to
saying
do
like
that.
absolutely not. Yeah.
Yeah, like either push back and say, hey, can I do something else? Or like be like, hey, I'm going to leave the company. So and again, like this was heading into 2021. So like Q4 2020, a lot of still up in the air about what's going on in the world. So I'm like, all right, I'm just going to dive into this thing full go and just tackle it. So I kind of took pride in that. And I kind of had a chip on my shoulder, honestly, because like you said, like, we had award-winning team. Like I had just won sales leader of the year at the whole company globally. And then now here I am again, doing a totally different thing and calling into customers who don't like us, like literally people who had canceled. So, but I also thought, hey, like if I'm being assigned to this, they think I can do it. So that was a confidence booster. And I also knew I could do it too. So that's kind of how I got over it. And I used it as fuel really to kind of prove something. So that's really, I just shifted the mindset from like, hey, why me? My ego is being checked and the whole thing. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to flip it and I'm going to go get it and have fun with it. And it felt impossible, honestly, but I'm like, all right, we're going to go do this.
What made it so impossible?
So the number we first had, I don't know how they picked this number.
Isn't that most numbers though?
That's the thing is like, cause the revenue was zero. The revenue was zero, right? And it was me, this other senior rep named Brian, and the AE. So only 2 like sellers. And they're like, all right, this is all accounts who hate us, really. The number's 2.3 million for the first year. And we're like, okay. And mind you, like I've come from teams, we were doing 20, 25 million. Bigger teams though, as an individual contributor myself, I had done, 7, 8, 9, $1 million a year myself, but these are like with big accounts. I'm like, all right, how are we going to find $2.3 million from this territory? And neither of us knew how it would be possible, but we were just like, all right, let's just go and see what we can do. So it really did seem honestly impossible, but I was like, hey, let's see how much of a chunk out of this number we can go get and try to, make a name for ourselves. And that was kind of, we both, me and Brian, we both were like, hey, let's just go after it and see if we can do it.
Yeah. Okay, so it's the Renegade Brigade. That's the Renegade Brigade. That brigade. That's what I'm gonna call it. So, so y'all three are like, okay, we have these people who absolutely don't like us. We got to go get 2.3 million, and you said you got after it. So this kind of moves into segment number two. Is like, what did you do to make that happen? Like,
Yeah.
what were you doing here? What was the steps? Um, did your leadership come into play while you were an individual contributor continue? So you kind of galvanize this team. I'm just so curious, like what was going on here?
Yeah. It's a great question. So my first thing was like, all right, I got to get my mind right. Because, like, you can't do this from like a negative headspace. That was my thought. Because if I was like resentful and like negative, I would have been going through the motions. There's no way in hell that the customer I'm calling trying to get him back with us is going to buy what I'm saying. So
No.
I've been big into fitness over my life, and I'd been working out for like 20 years at that point. So I don't know if you've heard of this program called 75 Hard.
Yep. Yep.
So I was like, all right, when this is my idea, I'm like, when the fiscal year kicks off, I'm starting 75 Hard.
Yep.
And
Well, for context, for people that don't know, 75 hard is like 75 days. It's like no drinking, two exercises a day. What are the other things? 8 hours of sleep, something like that. And just so people know
yeah,
it.
yeah. So it's like a mental transformation program that is based on working out and eating right. But essentially, yeah, to your point, 2 workouts a day, 45 minutes each workout. One of the workouts has to be outdoors. You have to follow a diet, a strict diet. So they don't, it can be whatever diet you choose. You have to drink a gallon of water a day. No alcohol and no cheat meals. You have to take a progress picture of yourself every day with your shirt off, and you have to read 10 pages of a nonfiction book every day, like kind of a self improvement type of book. So all these things, and again, just hearing from people doing it, like obviously it transforms you physically, but it's more so about like the mental transformation. So that was my initial thing that I decided to do. And in hindsight, it was very smart because I don't know if you've done 75 hard or if anyone listening to this has done 75 hard, but the biggest impact that you see is like after a week or 2 weeks, it kind of flips your mental just ability to just tackle things and get things done. So that just changed like the way I felt about everything. So it really does turn you into like a machine, and it sounds corny, but like it actually is real. So that helped me with my mindset, and it helped me with just like my regimen throughout the day, being super structured in what I'm doing. When it comes to the sales piece of it, like I had been out of the field for 4 years. Um, and yeah, I was leading this team, but like I was doing the selling with Brian as well. So I had to get back to the basics. So daily outbound prospecting, something you know quite a lot about, is getting back to doing that myself every day. Where the past 4 years, like I was, hey reps, like let's go do this. I might help do some of it, but like they're doing it, not me. So I had to get back to that. I had to get back to managing the sales process. I had to get back to doing demos. Like again, all stuff I'd done a little bit of the past 4 years, but as a leader, it's different because the rep I always let the reps do the lion's share of the work, and like I wasn't trying to do it for them. That was my leadership style. And so this was a little bit different. And so yeah, I had to do it, and then it really sharpened my skills, right? And that was a confidence booster too, because I obviously had a lot of success as an individual contributor. um, and it took me back to that place, and like we were having fun with it. And we were calling the customers who didn't like us, so like we had to come in kind of falling on the sword, right? And the guy I worked with, he and I are like in this way, like we're an open book. Like he's a very likable, caring guy. So like people kind of, we came in, we're like, hey, like, and I had been at TechTarget for a long time. He had been there for a while. We're like, hey, like we're coming in. This is what the situation is. Like we'll do everything we possibly can to make it so that you're confident in working with us again. And so it was just a unique way to approach it that like worked for us, and it worked like tremendously well, which we had a lot of fun with it, which was crazy in hindsight.
That's the key, like having fun with it and making sure that it actually excites you and it's not just something, hey, I just got to go do this. One thing you talked about is it sharpened your skill set. You mentioned a couple things like obviously prospecting, demos, etc. Was there a skill set that before you were good at, but then you got better at it because you did this?
Yeah, all of them, demoing specifically. So like we have a SaaS platform, right? It's called Priority Engine, and so like I had done demos of it, but a lot of times the reps are leading the demos, and I'm like coaching them on it. But then for me, then going in and we would do demos on every sales call. Even if it wasn't like a set demo, I'd always have it teed up, ready to show someone the data, like, and I would do this on every call. So just my ability to like leverage that vehicle in customer conversations and doing it in an impactful way, on the fly. So that I just became super confident with my ability to do that, because TechTarget, pre me being in sales leadership, we sold ads in lead gen. So like I was really good at doing that, whereas like I wasn't really like an IC for selling SaaS ever.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
coached
It's
the
just
team how to sell
a
it,
different motion for you.
so I never did it. So it really it allowed me to become a SaaS sales professional, really. Whereas previously, looking back, maybe I wasn't, right. I thought I was, but after doing hundreds of demos, I'm like, all right, you know, versus coaching people doing demos, it's just different.
Yeah, for sure. And advice for people listening in, this is mostly for leaders, but advice for leaders for their sales team on how they should run demos, as a person who ran them, and then also someone who probably gets demoed as well, advice on that.
Yeah, you got to customize it to the person, and don't just lead with all the speeds and feeds and whatever the technical stuff, and show them everything. Make it super pertinent to who you're demoing. So don't ever do something the same way every time. Make sure to customize it. Show the best stuff first. Don't save it for last. Like, this is something a lot of people do, is they like try to build up to like the finale. Don't do that. Like, show them the best use case for their specific situation right from jump. Get them excited, and then work backwards from there. And don't be too regimented. Like, a lot of people are like, oh, I have a 30-minute demo call, I'm going to take you through my 30-minute demo. Like, I never really did that. We would always have calls, and it could be even like a scoping intro call. I'd have it ready. If it made sense to show it, I would do it, but it hadn't been on how the conversation flowed. So go back to like your sales process, and always dictate your sales process. This is also something that helped sharpen for me, and this is something I was always pretty good at, but like, know your sales process, dictate the sales process, and make sure that the customer is bought into you doing that, because you can't just rely on the customer to like go the way you want them to go, obviously. So you want to make it mutually beneficial, but like dictate the process. And then like back to basic stuff, like, timely follow up, taking like copious notes on every single call, and like just action items, and just making sure that you're dictating that whole process. And that's something that like I really dialed back in. It's something I did as an IC, but it's something that just made me super comfortable with the sales process again.
Yeah. So it sounds like listen to the research or the call, whatever someone's saying. Make sure that it's customized. Don't go completely off the rails. Any other skill sets that you learned like along the way during this time where it was like, dang, I'm back as an IC right now, and I was leading a team that was killing it.
Yeah. Um, so it gives you as a leader the ability to, not just talk about it, but to be about it, right? And yeah, so I think that's helpful as a leader too. So you don't ever want to do it for them, but you can lead from the front and like do it with them, or show them an example of how you've done it or doing it. And reps hate to hear like, hey, back in my day, like this is how I used to do it. And it's like, dude, you were a rep in 2016. Like, I don't care, right? Whereas this experience refreshed that for me, and like it just, I don't know, makes it more real. And anyone that I'm managing now, like they know, they can see where I'm coming from, versus like, hey, this is just some old head who's like hasn't sold in 10 years, and like, okay, he like was good 10 years ago. So I don't know, it just got me back to that, which is cool. And I think it's important to do that as a leader, even if you don't have a unique situation like I did, to be able to stay, up to date and refresh with your skill set there. So it just gives you like, I don't know, street cred with your reps, really, which is important, as you know.
I mean, besides going back and being a full-time rep, is there any advice for someone who is a VP of sales to showcase that they're doing that? Is it exactly what you said? Like, hey guys, I'm on the floor today with you. I know we're mostly remote, but like, is it that? Is it something else that we're missing here? I'm just
So this is something that even when I was leading that team is like we would do like call blitzes, and I would do it with them. Um, and so we'd be cold calling, and like I would have a list too. And like it could be a list that we curated together doing like LinkedIn prospecting. It's like, hey, here's some executives of these accounts that want to call. So like a lot of reps are hesitant to do that, right? So if you do it with them alongside of them, that just gets people fired up because a lot of times a leader can be like, hey, go make X number of calls, right? Go do this. And it's like the rep might be like, you're not going to do that. Like, why would I want to do this? So I think if you do that alongside of them, I think that's huge, right? Because it just makes them feel better about what they're doing. And if they're like, all right, if my boss can do this, like I can do it too. I'm not above it. So
Last thing,
get in there.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just get in there and do it. Mix it up with them.
Get in there, do it with them, and then also as well, we were going to move to like segment 3, talk about the impact it's had for your career. But we all want to hear what happened at the end of the story. Did you hit the goal?
Yeah, so we did really well. 2021, we hit our number just barely. So we hit 2.3 million in bookings. So Brian and I went to club that year in Miami. It was a blast. The next year, we got new batches of customers to call into, and our number was similar. I want to say it was like 2.5 million or something like that. Or less than 3. So we absolutely crushed it in our second year. Like I wrote down like we did. I think we did 14 million in bookings in the second year.
Whoa, what?
Yeah, we go off of a rev rec model, but we did 14 million in bookings, Brian and I, in our second year doing this. Now, we were able to sell some other stuff too, which helped that. Like we acquired an enterprise strategy group, which is like a research firm. So we were selling that too. So that helped a ton. But like we absolutely crushed it. I think we were like one of the highest percentage to quota teams in the whole company globally. So when we had club in Barcelona that year, so that was really cool. It was also really cool for Brian, who the guy I worked with on my team. Like it was, I don't know, it was like a rejuvenation of his career. Like people, like he was getting so many shout outs. The whole company like realized how awesome he is, where I think he kind of was like tucked away before that. And and also too, like our relationship like is huge now. Like he's one of the best people I've ever worked with, and like I admire so much about him, like as a person, as a family man, the whole thing. So like he's like one of my good friends for life now. Like I love the guy, and so that was like we crushed it for 2 years. Like he had a resurgence in his career, I had a resurgence and like a newfound confidence in what I was doing, and we had really good success. And then in 2023, I got moved over to lead a team in our enterprise org. So more of a traditional leadership role again, managing remote reps. So like kind of came full circle back to what I was doing, not in the field role, but like in our enterprise org. So it all kind of worked out, which was cool. So great experience.
That's an amazing story, man. Well done to both of you. Shout out to Brian. Shout out to
Yeah,
Brian.
Brian McGovern.
Yeah, there he is. He's getting after it. So what I want to also talk about as well, you mentioned that it was a resurgence for your career. You know, as you've gone back into leadership, are you treating leadership differently? Are there things that you now see differently as well because you were a rep, like you actually went back to it?
Yeah, I am. And this is something I learned like from that experience, and then just as you get older doing this is like everybody's different. So you have to work with people differently depending on what motivates them, who they are, what they care about, their strengths, their weaknesses. So just assessing what those things are and get them back to kind of like the playbook that that works like foundationally, but then being able to like have some artistic flexibility and freedom to be able to make it their own, right? So that's something that really instilled in me, and from working with Brian, like he has a very, very unique style, like old school. So I'm like, all right, like if I can work with someone like that, and then a lot of the reps you work with outside that are typically like newer reps, like in their 20s, right? So like they're going to have a very, very, very different skill set, very different style. So just being able to adapt, like that is the biggest thing as a sales leader. Then my wife tells me this too. It's like not everyone is like you. Like when you're working with a team, it's probably unlikely that you're someone just like you, who's motivated like you, has the same strengths as you. So just be aware of that when you're working with people, and just have empathy and like realize that everybody's kind of where they're at, and try to get them to elevate to their next level, which may not be what you see as like your next level, right? When you were a rep, but just really, I don't know, just be more unique and specific to that rep specific, and don't just like, hey, blanket statement, this is what you got to do, you got to go after this, be hardworking, like that falls flat. So that's something that it taught me.
Just really understanding the rep and what their goals are. Have you, since you've done that, have you unpacked different goals that reps now have differently than it was in 2019? So the reason I ask that is because I think COVID obviously changed people's outcomes, goals, how they want to live, etc. So I'm curious if the goals you hear now are like, wait, okay, I didn't hear that when I was a leader. It's different now.
That's the thing, like, I don't know, pre 2020, it was a very typical like kind of goal that people had. It was like, be successful, get promoted, make a lot of money, like be the best, get notoriety. Now it's, I think that the pandemic kind of, a lot of people rethought what was important to them, right? So they're like, people might be, obviously have lives outside of work. So it's, work's not the end all be all. So understanding what motivates them maybe outside of work is helpful. Because I think people open their eyes a little bit and they're like, hey, like here are the things that motivate me outside of work. So it's also important as a leader, like to understand that too. And if you know those things, you're able to like relate to that rep a little better. Then it's like, hey, back in the day, it was like, hey, crush numbers, make bank, and get promoted. Like, okay, like I think that's like 10 years ago kind of mentality. There are still reps like that too, but it's not like back then. It was like everyone was like that or either pretended to be because that's the way like leadership was.
That was the drum beat, yeah.
Yeah, but now it's like, hey, like I want some, work-life balance. I want to have a side hustle. I want to do this thing. I want to work remotely. Like, and these are all things we just have to be like open to, right? Because at the end of the day, it's about the rep being productive and getting the best out of what they're doing for themselves and also for the company too. So you don't want to force people into boxes based off of what your experience was, because like, you know, I'm getting seasoned now, so like my experience as a rep is different than someone now. It's extremely different. So I just have to be cognizant of that as a leader, and I think that's super important.
You do, you do. No, I think this is all incredibly helpful information, because going from, hey, we have an amazing team, everyone is doing so well, to now I'm on this team where nobody wants to talk to me. I got to reach out to accounts that absolutely despise me. And seeing how that's impacted you as a whole is amazing to see. And as we wrap up here, we already kind of did this already, but do you have any shout outs or mentions to anyone as we wrap up?
Well, we said it, but Brian McGovern, it's my guy
Yep.
right there. So
Yep.
thanks for being there with me in the trenches. So um, yeah. So other than that, I mean, shout out to TechTarget. I've been there for 16 years, so giving me a lot of
Been
opportunities.
there for a minute.
Yeah, I've been there a minute, and so even though this one we talked about was challenging, I'm thankful for it in hindsight.
Yeah. Any,
At the time, not so much. I'm like, oh, come on.
I love that this one. Any lasting and imparting thoughts or wisdom you want to give to people, Rich,
Yeah,
before we?
yeah. A couple things. So like, check your ego. This is all aspects of life, but like, this was an ego check for me that maybe I didn't ask for, but it was helpful. Check your ego. Look inward. Right, with everything you do, be like, don't point fingers at other people. Like, look inward, and you can always change your situation, make it better, regardless of the situation, how shitty it might seem to you. You can always make it better. And then yeah, just be humble, work hard, have fun, and be a good person, and like you're gonna do all right in whatever you're doing, especially in leadership. So that's all I got for you, my man.
Awesome, Rich. Well, appreciate you. Everyone listening in, hopefully you took some notes, you got something out of it, and now you have a path here. If you ever are in this scenario, you know what to do and you know it's possible. And maybe you might make a best friend along the way. So hope you all enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you all on the next one. All right, that wraps up our conversation with Rich today on the episode of the On the Record podcast. So let's recap the 3 things that we learned so y'all can go execute. Mindset is everything. Clearly, Rich showed us by tackling challenges head on and maintaining a positive attitude isn't critical. I mean, y'all heard the story. If that was me, I probably would have been like, yeah, that ain't for me, fam. So he came in and said, hey, look, I'm going to come and make sure that I can maximize this opportunity. And he did exactly that. And again, you all can do the same. 2 is never stop learning. Even though he's a seasoned leader, even though his team had won a lot of awards, he still was like, I need to learn and find value in getting back to the basics so I can be successful. I think that's an inspiring story for anyone. It doesn't matter what role you're in, to continuously sharpen your skills and get better. And then ultimately adapt your leadership style. So he knew that with his team that he had before, he had a certain leadership style. As he built his new team and worked with other team members, he had to find out different ways to motivate them and get them rolling. So thanks for tuning in. Hopefully you enjoyed Rich's conversation and his story. I was really inspired by it, but I never quit. Take ownership in what you do, and you can always be successful at anything you put your mind to. So hopefully you all enjoyed this episode and it helps you become a better leader moving forward. And we'll see you on the next one.